Cheating wife stories. My cheating wife destroyed everything I thought I knew about love and loyalty. Olivia and I had been together since middle school. Inseparable, or so I believed. But one afternoon, I came home early to find her in our bed with my 63-year-old stepfather. The betrayal was unbearable. But the real shock, her only excuse was, I just needed something different. Little did I know, this wasn't just an affair. It was part of something much bigger and darker than I ever imagined.
Have you ever been cheated on? Let me know in the comments. Let's continue.
I never imagined I'd be sharing this story with anyone outside of my family or therapist. But here we are. Maybe putting it into words will make it all feel less like a nightmare. I'm Ethan, 26 years old, and until recently, I thought I had the perfect life. My wife Olivia and I have been together since middle school, 7th grade to be exact. We stuck together all through high school and even attended the same college. No breaks, no time apart. Everyone saw us as inseparable, and at our senior prom, we were even voted most likely to get married. And we did. In our junior year of college, I proposed, and we tied the knot right after graduation. It wasn't a surprise to anyone. It felt inevitable, like gravity pulling us together. Our families had practically merged by then, celebrating every milestone together. We built a solid life. Olivia excelled as an engineer, quickly climbing the ranks in her field, while I established myself in pharmaceutical sales, earning a comfortable living. We bought our first home in a quiet, picturesque neighborhood, complete with a backyard Olivia had always dreamed of. Our schedules were busy, but we always found time for date nights, long weekend getaways, and planning for our future together. At least that's what I thought we were doing. We had a son, Mason. He just turned 2. He was our everything, the center of our world. At least I thought we were a we, but I should start from the beginning because, looking back, maybe I should have seen the cracks before everything shattered. There were moments, small, seemingly insignificant at the time, that should have been warnings. The way Olivia sometimes hesitated before answering questions about her day, the way she became more protective of her phone over the years, the subtle changes in her demeanor when Thomas was around. I ignored them all, dismissing them as normal fluctuations in a long-term relationship. Love blinded me, made me complacent, and now I realize that ignorance wasn't bliss. It was a ticking time bomb.
Ethan is starting to see the red flags. Good for him.
My parents divorced when I was 6. My dad checked out of my life soon after, so it was just me and my mom until she remarried when I was 15. Her new husband, Thomas, was a former basketball player, a D1 college athlete who spent years playing overseas. Not quite NBA material, but he had a career doing what he loved before eventually settling down as a roofer. He was always the larger-than-life presence in any room. At 6 feet 6 inches, he towered over most people, including me. I took after my mom's side, barely hitting 5 feet 6 inches. I wasn't insecure about it, not really. I never had an interest in sports, so I didn't dwell on height the way some guys did. I focused on staying in shape, hitting the gym, and building a career that provided for my family. Thomas and I never had a deep bond, but we got along. He was just there. Not a bad stepfather, but not a father figure either. I never thought much about how Olivia interacted with him, but she'd known him as long as I had. She was always with me after all. Now I can't stop thinking about it. Every conversation, every shared look, every casual moment between them replays in my mind like a puzzle I should have solved sooner. Was there a glance that lasted too long? A touch that lingered more than it should have? Were there inside jokes I wasn't a part of? Laughter shared in ways I never noticed? The memories swirl, morphing into something insidious, something I had been too blind to see. I question every moment, every decision, every time I trusted her. And the worst part, I don't know if I'll ever find the answers I need. It started like any other day. I was supposed to work until 4, but luck was on my side. Half my sales closed early, so I was able to head home by 1. It felt like a good day. As I pulled into the neighborhood, I noticed Thomas's car parked down the street from our house. Strange. He didn't usually visit unannounced. At first, I figured he must know someone nearby. I took my usual route in, entering through the side door. No cameras there. It was quicker than going through the garage, and Olivia always left it unlocked when she was home. The house was quiet, too quiet. But then I heard it. No mistaking those sounds. My stomach dropped. My pulse pounded in my ears. I moved on instinct, creeping upstairs with my heart hammering against my ribs. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, and there they were. Olivia, my wife, my everything, and Thomas. in our bed. I stood there for at least 10 seconds before either of them noticed me. 10 seconds where my mind tried and failed to process what I was seeing. She saw me first. Her face turned ghost white. She gasped and scrambled off him, covering herself with the sheets. He moved slower, almost lazily, as if he didn't care. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. The silence stretched before Olivia finally whispered, "Ethan, I can explain." Explain? Explain what exactly? That she had just torn apart the very foundation of our life? That the vows we took meant nothing? That the man I had trusted as family had betrayed me in the worst way imaginable? The word echoed in my mind, hollow and meaningless. There was nothing left to explain, nothing that could undo what I had seen. There was no explanation that could make this anything other than what it was. The worst part, I wasn't even angry. Not at first. I was numb, detached, like I was watching someone else's life implode. I asked her why. It was the only word I could manage. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just stared at me with empty eyes as if I were nothing more than a fleeting moment in her life and said, "I just needed something different." Her voice was devoid of remorse, of guilt, just a cold, detached statement that shattered everything I thought we had built together. The words echoed in my mind, each syllable twisting like a knife, cutting through years of trust and devotion. Different? What did that even mean? Different from the life we built together? From the love I gave her unconditionally? Different from our family? From our son? The weight of her words crushed me, but what hurt most was the emptiness in her gaze, as if I had never truly mattered at all. Different? Different from what? The life we built? The love I gave her? The betrayal hit in waves. First came shock, then hurt, then rage so blinding I nearly lost control. But I didn't. I walked out.
Olivia chose to have this affair in her and Ethan's house. She is so disrespectful. What would you do if you saw this?
The days that followed were a blur, a chaotic mix of anger, disbelief, and crushing sorrow. I filed for divorce immediately. There was no discussion, no attempts at reconciliation. Olivia tried to reach out, sent a few texts, but none of them carried any real weight, just empty words from someone who had already moved on. I moved in with my mom, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't stand being in that house. Every corner of it felt tainted, every room haunted by betrayal. My mother was shattered. The pain in her eyes mirrored my own, maybe even surpassed it. This wasn't just about my marriage ending. It was about her husband, the man she trusted, shattering everything. She had built a life with Thomas, trusted him, loved him, and now she was facing the same devastation I was. The nights were the hardest. We'd sit in silence, both lost in our own thoughts, trying to make sense of something that was beyond comprehension. Thomas tried to call. I blocked him. He left voicemails, rambling messages that ranged from desperate apologies to justifications that made me sick to my stomach. He said he had fallen into temptation, as if it had been some unavoidable accident rather than a conscious betrayal. He begged me to meet him in person, but the thought of being in the same room as him made my skin crawl. Olivia, her remorse was even more pathetic. Her first few texts were generic apologies. Then came the excuses. She had felt trapped, she said. She needed to find herself. She had been feeling disconnected for years but never spoke a word of it, as if that excused anything. And then the messages stopped, just like that. Like I had been erased, discarded the moment I was no longer useful to her. It made me question everything. Had she ever loved me, or had I simply been a convenient choice? And then the thought hit me like a freight train. How long had this been going on? How many moments, how many years of my life had been a lie? I spent days spiraling, replaying every memory, every interaction, trying to pinpoint when it had started. But that was the worst part. I had no idea. I had been blind, oblivious to the cracks forming right under my nose.
Ethan's mother was betrayed too. This family is really going through a tough time.
I had to know. If I was going to move forward, I needed the truth. All of it. So I started digging. I went through old phone bills, text records, emails. At first, it was overwhelming. A tangled web of messages and moments that I had never paid attention to before. But then I started seeing patterns, late-night texts, calls made when I wasn't home. A pattern of secrecy that stretched back further than I had initially suspected. Olivia and Thomas had been in contact far more frequently than I had ever realized. It wasn't just casual conversations. These were deep, ongoing exchanges. There were affectionate messages, secret meetups arranged when I was at work, and inside jokes that I was never meant to see. My stomach turned as I scrolled through the past, uncovering a life I never knew existed. And the worst part? Thomas wasn't the only one. My breath caught in my throat as I read through the messages. Other men, strangers, some from work, some from the past, others I didn't even recognize. This wasn't just an affair. It was a pattern, a sickness. And I had been nothing more than a convenient constant in her life while she chased the thrill of something different. The signs had been there all along. The sudden trips out of town for work conferences, the inexplicable nights when she would come home late, exhausted but distant, the times she spent glued to her phone, subtly angling the screen away from me. I had been a fool, completely blind to what was happening right in front of me. The trust I had placed in her, the faith I had in our relationship, it had all been for nothing. I thought I had already hit rock bottom. But this was deeper, darker, more twisted than I could have imagined. I wasn't just betrayed, I had been used. Mason, my son, my world. A panic I had never felt before gripped my chest. Was he truly mine? I did the only thing I could. I got a paternity test. The days waiting for the results felt like torture, every second stretching into eternity. The anxiety clawed at me, making sleep impossible, making every moment feel like an eternity. When the envelope finally arrived, I hesitated before opening it, terrified of what I might find. Mason was mine. The relief was overwhelming, but it didn't erase the pain. I had lost my wife, my stepfather, my sense of self, but at least I still had my son. He was the only thing that mattered now, but the damage had been done, and I would never be the same again. I kept digging, needing to understand how far this deception went. I reached out to Olivia's closest friends, hoping one of them would crack and give me some insight. Some refused to speak to me, some acted oblivious, and others confirmed my worst fears. Olivia had been living a double life for years. They knew. Some even covered for her. She had mastered the art of deception, making me believe in a fairy tale, while she orchestrated a separate existence behind my back. One of her former colleagues let something slip, a name I hadn't seen in my search. Another man, another piece of the puzzle. He wasn't just a fling. He had been around before Thomas, before our marriage. The realization hit me like a freight train. Olivia had never been faithful. She had been testing the limits of my oblivion from the very beginning. I traced back through my memories, searching for the moment our love had started to unravel. Was it before Mason? Was it before our wedding? Or had she ever truly been committed at all? Then one night something clicked, something small, a memory, years old. Olivia's bachelorette party. She didn't want one at first, but her friends convinced her. She stayed out late that night, came home looking off. Not drunk, but off. I had assumed it was just exhaustion, stress, but now I wondered. I dug deeper, found old conversations, found an unfamiliar number that had been in contact with her around that time. Another man, another secret. She had been unfaithful before we were even married. The realization crushed whatever was left of my soul. I had spent years building a future with a woman who had never truly been mine. Every moment of love, every whispered promise, every sacrifice, I had given them all to someone who had been lying to me from the start, and I'd never know how deep the betrayal truly ran. I had to know. If I was going to move forward, I needed the truth. All of it. So I started digging. I went through old phone bills, text records, emails. At first it was overwhelming. A tangled web of messages and moments that I had never paid attention to before. But then I started seeing patterns. Late night texts, calls made when I wasn't home, and not just recently, years of it. This wasn't a sudden affair. It wasn't something that had happened in a moment of weakness. It had been planned, nurtured, carefully concealed. Olivia and Thomas had been in contact far more frequently than I had ever realized. And the worst part, there were other names. Mason was mine. That was the only relief in this nightmare. But the rest, I'll never know. Did it start after we got married? Before? Did she ever love me? Or was I just the safe, predictable choice while she waited for something different? I spiraled. I drank too much. I stopped sleeping. I replayed that moment in my head over and over again, trying to see the signs I missed. And I'd never know how deep the betrayal truly ran.
That concludes this story. Let me know what you think about this and leave it in the comments. Make sure to watch the next unbelievable, captivating real-life story.